Green Lantern has a long and storied history, dating back to 1949 with the Golden Age hero Alan Scott. But in 1959, the character would be reinvented, moving from the realms of magic to the world of science, and a new hero emerged, Hal Jordan. Hal spent 35 years becoming the greatest officer the galaxy had known, but in 1994, the Corps would be forever changed. After the loss of his home, Hal Jordan betrayed the Green Lantern Corps and destroyed the central power battery, becoming the villain known as Parallax. For 10 years, Kyle Rayner alone bore the torch of willpower across the galaxy. But in 2004, the Green Lantern Corps would go through another monumental shift as Hal Jordan returned, marking the beginning of a new era for the Emerald Warriors and the start of what is now known as the greatest Green Lantern run of all time. Comment down below what your favorite Green Lantern story is. I'm Brennan and Shayde for the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Before we get into the main topic of today's episode, I do want to take a brief moment to discuss a little bit of my backstory with Green Lantern. Never in a million years did I believe that I would be here talking to you about Green Lantern so excitedly and waiting to do it for so long. You see, when I was a kid, I didn't really like the Green Lantern. I didn't like the concept of the character. Anything that the wielder can imagine turns into a green light that can be physically touched in the world. It was a very stupid concept to me. I didn't like the character. I didn't like Hal Jordan, John Stewart, Guy Gardner. I didn't like any of it. And to be honest with you, looking back on it now, a lot of that opinion is based upon the Green Lantern movie starring Ryan Reynolds, a movie that is much hated and deservedly so. Now, I had read some Green Lantern stories. I read Blackest Night when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it, but that didn't translate to the character itself. I thought that story was interesting because of the writing and the art, and because of all of the characters that are involved in the story. It is a universe-wide event, after all. But all that would change exactly 1 year ago today. On July 3rd, 2024, I was on the road to Colorado, and I had nothing to pass the time but to read a bunch of comic books. Now, I didn't want to lug 50 graphic novels with me in my bag, because that would get pretty heavy, so I was limited to what was available for free with a Kindle Unlimited subscription, not a prescription, a subscription. When I was looking through, I finally decided maybe it was a time to take the leap and see what everything was all about. And because of that, I read the Green Lantern Corps series written by Peter J. Tomasi for the New 52, and I was instantly hooked. On that trip, I would alternate back and forth between reading Marvel comics and DC comics, but I always found that I was gravitating back towards the Green Lantern Corps. Now, that's not to say I didn't read other great comics. This is when I reread Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is when I read Planet and World War Hulk, among many others. But I was constantly wanting to come back to the Green Lantern Corps series. And I was so curious about this. I had finally become invested in the character and in the Corps as a whole. It was after this that I made my first foray into Kyle Rayner, who since then has become one of my favorite superheroes of all time. I think he's absolutely amazing, and I'm a little sad that he's not necessarily used as much. But that's not the point of this video here. After I read Kyle Rayner, I wanted to read a little bit more about Hal Jordan, and so I read much of the early stuff. I read his first appearance, and I read a bunch of comics in the 60s and the 70s. I haven't read Hard Traveling Heroes yet, but that is definitely next up on the list. After I felt comfortable with the character, and after I understood Kyle Rayner himself and everything that was going on, I decided it was finally time to leap into the Geoff Johns run of Green Lantern. Now, this was a series that I'd heard a lot about. In all of my research, it was this era of time that was always recommended to read. The Sinestro Corps War, The Blackest Night, Rebirth, all of this. And to be honest with you, even though I started loving Green Lantern, I even liked the older stuff with Hal Jordan, I was very hesitant. I didn't really believe that it was going to be that good. But my socks were completely blown off. I love this series so much. Geoff Johns' run is completely incredible. There are very few low points. There are very few. It changed the entire way that I view the character, and it just rocketed the entire Green Lantern Corps into one of my favorite concepts in all of comics. Now, with all that out of the way, I think it's time to get into our first chapter, the Book of Oa. Geoff Johns wrote the Green Lantern for 9 years, from 2004 to 2013. And in that time, he completely changed everything. He expanded the mythos in crazy, crazy ways, and he gave us what is the greatest retcon of all time. He began by bringing Hal Jordan back to life in Green Lantern Rebirth. And then there's, of course, a couple issues, and we get the first major Green Lantern story arc, the Sinestro Corps War, which, by my reckoning, is one of the greatest events ever in DC Comics, one of the greatest family-specific events. It is so satisfying, there's so much going on there, and it is absolutely amazing. After that, we have The Blackest Night, which is my favorite DC Comics event of all time. It is incredible. So much has changed, so much is brought in, and it paves the way for some of the more interesting stuff in the latter half of the pre-New 52 continuity. After Blackest Night, we had Brightest Day, which is not nearly as good, but there are still a few good moments in it. And then we lead into the War of the Green Lanterns, the final event before the New 52. In the New 52, we have plenty of other events. We have Hal Jordan kicked out of the Corps again, once again, for the 1,000th time, and then eventually brought back in to fight the Third Army, and ending with the Wrath of the First Lantern in 2013. What I think is the single greatest ending to a character that I have read. It's absolutely tremendous. Geoff Johns changed Green Lantern so much. His writing and his story was so good that there was even a time when Green Lantern was the highest selling DC comic book. Higher than Batman, higher than Superman, higher than Wonder Woman and The Flash. Above everybody else, it was Green Lantern. In fact, there were a few months where Green Lantern was the highest selling book, period, from any publisher. That includes Marvel. That means Green Lantern sold more than X-Men, than Spider-Man, than all of these other characters. If that doesn't tell you something, then I don't know what is, or what will, rather. It is an absolutely tremendous, tremendous story. Now, I think it's time for us to get into the actual event, and for that, we're going to head into Chapter 2, The Passing of the Torch. As I mentioned earlier, the first story that Geoff Johns penned for the Green Lantern was Green Lantern Rebirth, released in 2004, obviously written by Geoff Johns and penciled by Ethan Van Sciver. Now, this story is the one that set the stage for Green Lantern to become the best-selling comic book of the month. It includes some of the greatest moments, some incredible retconning. It's absolutely amazing. Now, as a precursor to all of the things that I'm going to be discussing today, I'm not going to go too in-depth on any of them. I don't want to spoil necessarily too much because, like I said, if you hadn't gathered by now, I think this series is absolutely worth a read. And if you're hesitant about the Green Lantern, if you don't really like the character, then I think this is a great place to jump in. I have a strong, sneaking suspicion that many of the things that we're going to see in any live-action Green Lantern story ever are going to be coming from the Geoff Johns run. That includes the Lanterns TV show. That includes any further stories that are told there. Hopefully they get their own live-action movie rather than just a prestige television show, but that's neither here nor there. So, slight spoiler warning, I am going to be talking about some things because the latest story arc I'm going to be talking about is 12 years old. I feel like we're more or less past the ridiculous spoiler portion, but even so, I want you to experience most of this for yourself. Now, let's actually get into Green Lantern Rebirth. Now, as I've mentioned before, earlier today, and on previous reviews that I've done, I believe in one of the Jurassic World ones, I was talking to Shayde about this. This 6-issue story arc includes what I think is the greatest retcon of all time. And it is the way in which Geoff Johns brings Hal Jordan back from the dead. Like I mentioned in the intro, from 1994 until this point, Hal Jordan was a villain. He was known as Parallax. He had destroyed the central power battery and demolished the entire Corps, leaving only one person left standing, Kyle Rayner. right? Now, he obviously, at the time, Kyle Rayner wasn't in the Corps. That was just, more of a figure of speech, but that's not the point. This is not the Kyle Rayner episode. If you want one of those, let me know down below. I would be more than happy to jabber on about Kyle Rayner for 6 hours straight. I'll have to cut it down because 6 hours is a little bit long, but I'd be more than happy to talk about him. But let's talk about Hal Jordan, the greatest retcon of all time. So to talk about this, we sort of have to go back in time until 1994. At the beginning of Green Lantern Volume 3, well, it wasn't necessarily the beginning. In the early days of Green Lantern Volume 3, issue number 48, an event transpired that would change the lives of everybody in the DC universe. Coast City was destroyed. And it was destroyed because of an event that actually went on in a Superman comic series. The city had been destroyed by Mongol and had been destroyed by Cyborg Superman, a character who is severely underrated in my opinion. But after this happened, Hal Jordan was so overcome with grief. He had no idea what to do, and he used his power ring to bring Coast City back from the dead. He created a ghost city, if you will, of the green, of the emerald light. He was trying to bring everything back. But the sheer force of willpower was not enough because his ring ran out of power. The Guardians appeared saying that he was misusing the power that he had been given, and because of this, he was going to face some repercussions. Now, Hal Jordan, again, overcome with grief, reacted pretty poorly to this. He thought that the Guardians were holding everything for themselves, and so he sought to go to them to tap into the central power battery itself so that he could gain the power to bring Coast City back from the dead. Now, this led to Hal Jordan going on a rampage. Like I said, he annihilated the Green Lantern Corps. He attacked his friends. He attacked everyone who was close to him. And it culminated with the destruction of the central power battery, and he was imbued with the Emerald Light. He became known as the villain Parallax in an amazingly designed suit. I believe it's by Daryl Banks. It looks incredible. Now, after this happened, like I said, Kyle Rayner was the only person left. Ganthet, one of the Guardians of the Universe, forged a power ring from the remains of what was on the planet of Oa and brought it to Kyle, saying, "You will have to do." Kyle spent 10 years doing this, 10 years being the only Green Lantern, and in that time, he did have interactions with Hal Jordan. He had interactions with Parallax, and in every single instance, nearly every single instance, except for a few time-displaced ones, which we're not going to talk about, Hal Jordan was the villain. Hal Jordan as the villain was a center of a universe-altering event known as 0 Hour, Crisis in Time, where he tried to completely reset the universe just to bring Coast City back from the dead. For 10 years, Hal Jordan was a villain. When it was decided by Geoff Johns that he was going to bring Hal Jordan back from the dead, he had to find a good way to do it, and he did. He found a perfect way to do it, and to not only bring Hal Jordan back as a hero, but to completely change the entire mythos. You see, he retconned it, that Hal Jordan was not in his right mind, obviously, but he was not in control of himself. He was in fact under the control of an entity known as Parallax. Now, those of you familiar with the Ryan Reynolds movie may recognize that name. Parallax is the weird smoke monster, I guess, that sort of, steals the body of a Guardian. Not important. Parallax, in the comics continuity and even in the movie, is the embodiment of fear in the universe. You see, every single emotion that a sentient being experiences is coalesced into an entity. And the first one that we learn about is Parallax. And it was revealed that Parallax had been imprisoned in the Green Lantern Central Power Battery. And when Hal Jordan had destroyed it, it had released Parallax and allowed him to seep into his mind, or rather to possess him. Parallax had been slowly seeping into Hal Jordan's mind over the course of the years. And it's retconned that that's the reason that he has gray hair in those storylines. But when the central power battery was destroyed, Parallax was released and fully possessed the body of Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan was no more. There was only Parallax, right? It is amazing. It's a great retcon. And again, the reason that it's so great is not only does it allow for an avenue to make this character a hero again, but it also expands the mythos in incredible ways. It makes you question the Guardians, which is going to be a running theme throughout all of Geoff Johns' run. It makes you realize that there is more to this world than we understand. There is more than just the emerald power of will. There is a yellow power of fear. And who uses that fear? None other than Sinestro, the longtime enemy of Hal Jordan, a former Green Lantern himself who had also gone renegade and attacked the Corps multiple times. One of the reasons that I think this story arc in particular is so good is because to me, this is the moment that really makes Sinestro three-dimensional. This is what changes him from just being a standard run-of-the-mill villain who used to be a hero into becoming the greatest Green Lantern villain of all time. And the way that it does it is because it focuses on the relationship between Hal Jordan and Sinestro. It focuses between them. It discusses the fact that Hal Jordan and Sinestro were not just friends, they had become best of friends. Sinestro was friends with Abin Sur, the man who had bequeathed his ring unto Hal Jordan in the first place. And because of that, Hal and Sinestro had become fast friends. And so Sinestro, when Hal Jordan revealed to the Guardians of the Universe that Sinestro was imposing fear upon his home planet of Korrigar, and that's the reason that it was so orderly, Sinestro viewed it as an act of betrayal, and he vowed revenge on the Green Lantern. And this is one of the reasons that I think this is so interesting to me. Looking back on this, it would have been so easy to ignore Sinestro, to leave him dead as well, and to make the greatest Green Lantern villain Mongol, for he was the one who had destroyed Coast City in the first place. He was the one who took everything from Hal. It would have been so easy to make him the villain. But you need to have more. There needs to be more of a relationship between these two characters for them to be the greatest rivalry in the cosmic universe. And it's not there with Mongol, but it is there with Sinestro. There is history there. Sinestro has some really great moments in this little story arc here. He's got great moments in the rest of the run as well, but this is the story arc that really sets it all up. And it's so amazing to me. Now, again, I'm not going to go into everything here. I'm not going to discuss all of what's going on with Sinestro. So now I'm going to move on to talking about Kyle Rayner himself, right? Kyle Rayner, as I've mentioned multiple times, had been the only Green Lantern for 10 years. He took over when Hal turned evil. It would have been very easy for Geoff Johns to kill Kyle Rayner off in this story. It would have been so easy for Kyle to sacrifice himself to bring Hal Jordan back from the dead, and to try and make Hal Jordan live up to that, to make himself worthy of Kyle's sacrifice. It also would have been incredibly easy for Kyle to have a really tenuous relationship with Hal. It would be incredibly easy for the two of them to be at odds, for them to hate each other, for either Kyle to hate Hal or for Hal to hate Kyle. It would have been easy to do that. But instead, as a mark of respect to the man who bore the torch of willpower for 10 years, Hal Jordan, after he finally meets him in person and really meets him, he says, "Let's stop and do this right," and he gives Kyle Rayner a hearty handshake. And Kyle has the grace and the depth of his character to turn to Hal and say, "I don't know if I'm up for this. I can't overcome great fear. I'm not like those of you who have done this before. I had no training. It was on the job where I learned to do this. I cannot overcome fear." And Hal looks at him and says, "What do you think you've been doing all this time?" And then flies off. And then Kyle has this little smirk where he understands and realizes he is now a true Green Lantern of the Corps, and he sets off after him to save the day. It's a great, great moment. And again, it's so great because it would have been so easy to have their relationship be hard, to have their relationship be based on anger or jealousy or anything, any of these other emotions. But it's not. It's based on a mutual understanding of these two characters. It's written so, so well. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about in Green Lantern Rebirth is the way that this story changes how willpower is manifested in the universe. You see, the way that it had been before, it was kind of bland. It was one of the reasons that I didn't necessarily like it. All I had seen before was Hal Jordan making a log to hit somebody, or a boxing glove. And then I read the Kyle Rayner storyline, and he was making these ginormous anime-inspired suits, and it was absolutely amazing. And this story explains why different people's willpower shows up differently on the page. It describes how Kyle Rayner is an artist. His constructs are constantly shifting, as though he's erasing and redrawing. He's making it perfect in his mind's eye. John Stewart's constructs are incredibly, incredibly detailed. It even says if you look close enough, you can see every individual nut and bolt. He is an architect who constructs from the outside in. Guy Gardner is a fire hydrant that has been opened. His willpower constantly sparks off of him, waiting to be unleashed. And Kilowog's is so cool to me. His is the only power ring that makes a sound when it is used. Based on the sheer force of his willpower, it's like a percussive cannon blast every time he fires it. And Hal Jordan himself, the reason that his constructs are simple, quote unquote simple, the reason why he makes logs and boxing gloves, the reason why he only makes a few things like an aircraft is because he is pure willpower, doing just what needs to be done to get the job done right. It's that simple. It's incredible. The art on it is amazing. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of Ethan Van Sciver or much of his art, but you cannot talk about this story without talking about the different manifestations of will, and that is all through Ethan Van Sciver. So, not a great guy. I don't really like him. I don't really like most of his books, but respect is credit where credit is due. All right. Now, again, I haven't gone over everything, but I think it's time to move on to Chapter 2, Fears Made into Light. The next major story arc that I want to talk about is the Sinestro Corps War, which, as I mentioned before, is one of my favorite family-wide events in the DC universe. It is absolutely amazing. It is incredible. We open seeing Sinestro recovering from his battle with Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan in Green Lantern Rebirth. And to see his inner monologue is so fascinating to me. It's so excellently written. It gives you such a good insight into the character, into his thought process, into why he does the things that he does. He wants the universe to change. Everything is chaotic. The Green Lantern Corps is not strong enough to bring order to the universe. Sheer willpower will not bring order to the universe. The only thing that will is fear. And this is where we get the establishing of the Sinestro Corps. You see, I hadn't read this story. I hadn't read all of this when I was younger, so I had just assumed that the Sinestro Corps was around all of the time. That was my complete understanding of the character. Anytime that I'd really seen him, except for the Green Lantern movie, he was wearing the yellow suit. To learn that it was introduced here, to learn that the emotional spectrum had been expanded out to not just being able to use the green power of will, but to use the power of other emotions was crazy to me. It's incredible. It's so well done. And again, it expands the universe so much. Again, I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm not going to spoil everything, but I am going to spoil a few things. Because specifically in this storyline, I want to talk about the way that Sinestro tries to change the galaxy. He puts together his core with obviously him at the head and with his various generals in place. And the people that he chooses to lead his army are so interesting to me. So interesting to me. We have obviously Sinestro himself. Then we have Cyborg Superman, obviously a character deeply tied to Green Lantern because of the event at Coast City. We also have another Superman character, another Superman adjacent character in Superboy Prime. Superboy Prime, the villain of Infinite Crisis. He comes back here, he escapes from his imprisonment on Oa and becomes an instrument of fear. We also have the return of the Anti-Monitor, the main villain from the very first universe-wide event in comic book history, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, I really like the Anti-Monitor. I think nowadays he's probably a little bit overused, but here it feels so right. The Anti-Monitor is so indelibly tied to the Green Lantern Corps because of the actions of the Guardians of Oa, what we learn in the Crisis on Infinite Earths. He is formed. The multiverse is formed. His birth is a direct reaction to an event, to the actions of one of the Guardians of the universe. It is so interesting to me. It's a perfect choice. And then finally, we have Kyle Rayner as Parallax. Dun dun dun. Kyle Rayner, the one who was the only Green Lantern when Hal Jordan became Parallax himself, becomes possessed by the being that brought him into the world of superherodom. It is so interesting. And again, it's another really great choice to me. It puts Kyle Rayner, the character that so many people loved for 10 years, it puts him in the same shoes as Hal Jordan. It is so well done. And the various aspects of his personality that we see throughout this possession are so interesting. Again, I'm not going to explain why or how or what any of that sentence means. If you've read the book, you know what I mean. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, then read the book because it's so good. The Sinestro Corps War is absolutely amazing. In this story arc, we also see the beginnings of a schism in the Guardians of the Universe, and a schism of the Guardians of Oa. Up until this point, there have been brief moments of argument in all of this, but this moment, they have such a disagreement about the way to move forward, about what to do in the future. And this schism leads directly to some of the best story work later on, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But it is so well done. And then the final thing that I want to talk about with the Sinestro Corps War is the city without fear, Coast City itself. See, Coast City, over the course of the beginnings of this story arc from Rebirth up until now, had slowly been rebuilding. There had been very few people who wanted to return after a while. After the city had been destroyed, naturally, everybody was weary. But slowly, more and more people began to return to Coast City, beginning with Hal Jordan's family. Now, when this happens, one of the villains, one of the instruments of fear from the Sinestro Corps, comes to Coast City and tries to attack Hal Jordan's family. Now, Hal naturally comes in and stops the attack. He takes the person away, and throughout this, I'm trying not to spoil too much. This is really hard to talk about without spoiling exactly what happens. In any case, Hal naturally defeats the villain, and when this happens, he tells everybody to leave. Hal Jordan tells everybody to leave Coast City, starting with his family. He says, "Get out of here. This is not good. I'm not losing another member of my family. I'm not losing anybody else." And Hal's brother turns to him and says, "Buddy, I don't think anybody's leaving." And Kyle says, "Look at this." And they turn around over the skyline, and they see that every light in Coast City is lit up with green. Nobody is leaving. This is the home of Green Lantern. The city accepts that, acknowledges it, and loves it. This is the city without fear. And the storyline ends with thousands upon thousands of people returning to Coast City. Traffic jams going back miles and miles as everybody wants to return. There's even a really funny moment where some people are painting over the welcome to Coast City sign. The population is empty. One of the guys says, "What do we do about this?" And the other construction worker says, "I guess we better start counting." It's great. This story arc sets up the fact that Coast City is to Green Lantern as Metropolis is to Superman, as Gotham is to Batman. Coast City is the home of Green Lantern, and they are proud of it. Maybe the Batman comparison's not quite so great there, but in any case, you get the gist. Now, I think it's time that we move on to our next chapter, The Final Prophecy. DC Universe's Blackest Night is, in my opinion, the greatest modern DC Comics event and very well may be the best DC event that has ever happened. It is certainly my favorite. It is absolutely amazing. Before I started to read Green Lantern, it was the only storyline that I enjoyed. I didn't like Green Lantern at all, but I loved Blackest Night. Again, if that doesn't tell you anything, then I don't know what to say. It is such a great storyline. Now, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, as we get further along in these storylines in this episode, I'm talking less and less about each story arc because I want you to read them more and more. And if you're going to read any Green Lantern adjacent book, I think you should read The Blackest Night. Starting with the very best Free Comic Book Day issue that's ever been made, Blackest Night #0. If you're coming into this not really knowing anything, if you're coming into this not knowing much about Green Lantern or what had happened in the DC universe before this, #0 is the perfect place to start. It explains every single thing you need to know. It explains who lives, who's alive, who's dead, what is going on, and it does it in such an interesting way. So I'm going to talk very vaguely and not as in depth as all of this, but do not take that as me thinking that this story is less important than Rebirth, because it is absolutely not. It is the exact opposite. This story is the culmination of 5 years of buildup. The seeds for this had been planted in Green Lantern Rebirth, in the very first issue of the new Green Lantern storyline that took place after Rebirth. It had been planted here. It had been slowly building up to this exact moment, the climax, the end to the trilogy of Green Lantern comic books. Now, I am going to talk a little bit about all of this in this storyline. Long story short, black power rings are suddenly popping up across the universe, and they are attaching to themselves to the corpses of fallen heroes. And those heroes are being risen from the dead to serve an evil entity that wants to wipe out all life in the universe. Now, I'm not going to talk about literally every person that gets a black ring in this storyline, because if I do, there are going to be some major spoilers for some crazy stuff that happens around issues 5 and 6. But I am going to talk a little bit about some of them. Fans of DC Comics will know some of these names, some of you will not. That's okay. You don't need to know everybody. You don't need to know every single thing that is going on at this point to get the full breadth of the story. It just makes it more enjoyable. Some of the people who get risen are Ralph and Sue Dibny, who died not that long ago, I guess, in Identity Crisis, I believe. Ralph and Sue Dibny. Geoff Johns, the Martian Manhunter. Aquaman, Arthur Curry himself. Boston Brand, otherwise known as Deadman. We have Pariah, a character from mostly Crisis on Infinite Earths. We have the Spectre, the spirit of vengeance himself. The wrath of God had been overtaken by the power of death. We also have multiple villains that have returned. There's like Cobra, and I think even Psycho Pirate returns, all in service of the ultimate entity of death, Necron. A giant skeleton, a giant decomposing corpse with a scythe as big as a skyscraper. It's absolutely amazing. It is so, so good. This story arc is incredible. And again, like I mentioned, this is the culmination of 5 years of buildup. Throughout all of the beginning of this, Geoff Johns was expanding the universe in crazy, crazy ways. Like I mentioned, it was not just the green power of will that had shown up in the universe. By this point, we now had, so obviously the green power of will, we had the violet light of love, the red of rage, yellow of fear, orange of greed or avarice, blue of hope, and indigo of compassion. All of it building up to an epic climactic fight, an absolutely beautiful rendering by Yvonne. I think it's pronounced Yvonne Reyes. Yvonne Rice. Pretty sure it's not Ivan. I'm fairly confident that it's Yvonne, but I don't know how to spell the last name or how to say the last name. It's Reis. I know how to spell it. He is tremendous. Absolutely amazing. And all of this ends with a turn for Sinestro in a way that when I was first reading this story, never in a million years would I have guessed that this is how this would happen. It is absolutely incredible. This is, bar none, the single greatest Green Lantern story ever told. And because of that, I am amazed, astonished, and saddened by the fact that we have not seen this story adapted in some way. Now, I understand that it would be difficult to do it in a live action way. There's lots of CGI that would have to come into here, and it would have to be, to make it satisfying enough, it would have to be towards the latter end of a cinematic universe, a universe where heroes, villains, where characters had died. That makes it difficult to adapt. But that being said, I cannot believe that this has not been made into an animated movie. I can't believe it. I mean, I can, because the only animated movies that get made these days are Batman and Superman, because DC believes that those are the only ones that people watch. And that's mostly true, but it sucks. And I don't think it would necessarily be true if you adapt a story like The Blackest Night. This is a story that is so good and so beloved that it has never gone out of print. Never. You walk into a comic shop, there is a 90% chance you will find this in trade paperback or in hardcover form somewhere. If you ask the teller for Blackest Night, there is a massive chance that they're going to have the book available for you. It's so good that in 2019, not important. I want to say it's 2019, actually. They released a massive 10-year anniversary omnibus. An omnibus that's so big, you could kill a man with it. You could hit them over the head, and they would likely be, at very minimum, heavily concussed. I have it on the shelf behind me. It's right there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. It may or may not be out of the frame. It's huge, and it's so good, and they keep reprinting it because it is a great, great book. It sells amazingly. It is cinematic. It is so, so good. And again, this is one of the books that completely changes everything about the mythos. It changes the universe in incredible ways. Now, the thing that comes after it is Brightest Day, which is not necessarily as loved, but and I don't really like it. There are a few interesting parts, like, for example, there's one aspect of the story with Hawkman and Hawkgirl that I really, really enjoy. I will say, by and large, I think that the Green Lantern specific tie-in issues are pretty good. They're fine enough. But the event as a whole is not exactly great. Now, as we wind things down, we have 2 chapters left. I'm going to go into the second to the last right now, The War Within. The final Green Lantern storyline before the New 52 is called The War of the Green Lanterns, and in it again has some incredible moments. It is a great ending to this continuity, even though not much changes in the New 52, because Geoff Johns had just gone through his own massive reboot for Green Lantern. He was like, I'm not doing that again. But in any case, it is the return of a classic Green Lantern villain. I'm going to say this even though it is a spoiler. We finally see the return of Krona fully. And at this point, Krona takes over the Green Lantern Corps. Again, I'm not going to explain how. I'm not going to necessarily discuss all of that. I just want to talk about some of the overarching points of this. It is so interesting, and it is, again, a great end to this continuity. It fully brings circle some of these things that we had been touching on in the beginning, and it makes excellent use of all of the various colors of the emotional spectrum. Again, not to go too in-depth to necessarily spoil anything, but long story short, the culmination of the storyline is that all of the Earth Green Lanterns, at this point, it was Hal Jordan, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, and Kyle Rayner. They had to take on different rings of the different colors. And the choices that they make here are so interesting to me. It would be super easy to not really pay any mind to this, to just randomly assign colors to random people. But the choices that are made here are so intelligent, I think. We begin with Kyle Rayner having the blue light of hope, which is perfectly in line with his character, perfectly in line with what we had experienced with him as 10 years as the only Green Lantern in the universe. We have John Stewart, who takes on the ring of compassion. John Stewart, who had been beating himself up over a mistake that he had made, man, I don't know, 10, 20, probably 10 years in the past, publication-wise. How long that is in universe is, necessarily, it's questionable at best. He takes on the Ring of Compassion. Hal Jordan takes the yellow Ring of Fear. He has more experience with fear than anyone else. He also takes the Orange of Greed, which I think is really interesting. I think that makes sense because when you're dealing with somebody who has such an ego as Hal Jordan, there is, of course, a certain level of greed that comes along with that. Greed to be the best, to be able to solve every problem, to be the ultimate Green Lantern in the universe. That takes a certain level of greed. You have to have at least a certain level of power hunger for that. And then the most interesting choices to me are Guy Gardner's rings. If you're following along, there's 2 left, so it's not necessarily a surprise, but he takes the red Ring of Rage and the violet Ring of Love. And he rallies against this. He's not a big fan of it, but there is a great moment that as soon as I read it, it had always stuck with me. There's a moment when, again, I'm not going to discuss what or why or how or whatever. They have to destroy something. And the way that they're doing this, they're not putting out enough power. And so it falls on the shoulders of Guy Gardner because he has the rings of rage and love, the 2 emotions that are the most extreme. 2 emotions that can completely change everything about you, the way that you act, the way that you think. They cloud the mind. Now, anybody who's been filled with rage or filled with love understands that. Rage and love make you do things that you wouldn't normally do otherwise. That's why they are the most powerful. That's why they have the most effect on the person who uses the rings. And there's a great moment where the only person who can complete this task is Guy Gardner because of these rings. And to do so, he has to tap into these emotions deep within himself. And when he does it, he yells, "I hate that I'm filled with rage. I love the Corps." That completely changed the way that I viewed Guy Gardner because of this. It completely changed everything about him. To me, Guy Gardner, he was just your stereotypical like football jock. You know, he liked being on the team, but he was like the quarterback. He was the guy who wanted to be the star. He was the guy who thought it was all about him. And hearing this moment where he hates that he's filled with this rage, he hates that he can't just be happy and peaceful, but that he loves the core. And he loves the core so much that it releases this epic power within the violet ring is so interesting to me. It's a moment that has always stuck with me. And I think that's the epitome of good writing. When you can take a character that you don't necessarily like, or in my case, it's a character that I don't necessarily like. I don't really like him. Granted, of course, reading some Guy Gardner stuff was what got me into Green Lantern in the first place, but that didn't change the fact that I didn't like him. Even after I started enjoying Green Lantern, the way that I always ranked the main 4 Earth Lanterns, I don't know what you would consider them, the beginning 4 Earth Lanterns, it was always Kyle Rayner, Hal Jordan, and John Stewart as a close third. He just barely eked below, because Hal Jordan is, so many stories are written about him. He's had so much more time to be expanded and to have some emotional depth. And then Guy Gardner was last. And it was a pretty far last. I didn't really like him all that much. But to be able to take this character and to make me find something in him that changed the way I viewed every single Guy Gardner story after that, that is good writing. Now, at the end of this story arc, once again, Hal Jordan is stripped of his ring. Now, of course, again, as I've said, why, what, how, I'm not talking about that. I just want to talk about the bare bones, because I think that you should read this storyline. The main Green Lantern, it's only 67 issues, which is quite a bit. But still, I think you should read at least a good portion of it if you're a fan of DC. Hal Jordan is stripped of his ring, and the ring goes and finds the next worthy person. The ring chooses the bearer in the same way that the wand chooses the wizard in Harry Potter. The ring flies onto the finger of Sinestro. Sinestro is back as a Green Lantern. So interesting to me, and it leads to such cool stuff in the future. I really think so. It leads to such interesting things, and it's another storyline that really further complicates the character of Sinestro. He's not just the villain. He's not a 2D villain. He's so complicated. He's such an interesting character. One of these days, I'm going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about how I rank comic book villains. But after reading through the Geoff Johns run, it's going to be really hard for me not to include Sinestro in the top 5. It's going to be really hard. Which again, great writing. Now, we're going to get into the next chapter, the final chapter of this video, the beginning. Well, the New 52, let's say. And that chapter is The Guardian's Reckoning. Specifically in the New 52 era, I'm going to actually talk about what I believe is the 3rd volume. There's obviously stuff that happens before this. It might actually be the 4th volume. I'm pretty sure it's the 4th volume. But in any case, the stuff that happens before it is really interesting. But to really talk about it, I have to go really in depth, and I don't necessarily want to take the time to do that right now, because it's very interesting, let's say. It introduces a new character. We see the introduction of Simon Baz, designed by Doug Mahnke, a character who I think is so cool, and his design is great. Shout out to Doug Mahnke. I met him at Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City. A lovely individual. He's jacked. He can bench like 400 pounds. Not important. He's a great guy. If you ever see him, he's a really nice man. If he's ever at a Comic-Con, he was really polite when I asked him to sign some of my books. In any case, I was also going to say, I almost bought some original art from him, but I couldn't swing it. I saw him too late in the weekend, and I'd already blown. I don't know why I said blown. Blown all of my money on other things. Not all of it. You get the point. I bought a lot of stupid collectibles. It's where I bought those rings that are sitting now behind me. Shayde can attest to that fact. I also bought a lot of my graded comics, one of which is, I forgot to mention this, is I think it's Green Lantern Corps number 201, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps number 201, which is the first appearance of Kilowog, one of the first graded comic books I ever bought. In any case, to actually get into the New 52, like I said, I just want to talk about the Wrath of the First Lantern, which is the 4th volume. I'm skipping over a lot here. But this story is so interesting to me. Like I mentioned early on in this video, the running thread throughout all of Geoff Johns' Green Lantern run has been that the Guardians are not the friendly, helpful little elves. They're not the friendly little elves that we view them as. They are devious. They are thinking multiple steps ahead. They don't necessarily have the best interests of the universe at heart. They may think they do, but they really don't. In their own, I really want to say corrupt way, they think that they're doing the best, but they are actually pretty much the secret villains throughout a lot of Geoff Johns' run. And I think that that's really, really interesting. The main villain, the First Lantern, is a character who I think is so cool. His real name is Volthoom, and we get some really, really interesting moments between specifically him and Kyle Rayner. I think it's very cool. Speaking of the New 52, Green Lantern New Guardians, which is the Kyle Rayner specific run. In the beginning, it's written by Tony Bedard, I believe. Incredible. Love it. So good. In any case, the main reason that I want to talk about this story is not because of really anything that happens in it, but is specifically issue number 20, the final Green Lantern issue written by Geoff Johns. The storytelling in this issue is so good. It's an oversized issue. I want to say it's like 85 pages, but I could be wrong about that. The point is it's very large, but the storytelling is so fascinating because even though we're in the middle of this event, we don't begin with the actual telling of the story. We begin by looking in the future. We begin with a new character, a new Green Lantern, having just passed their trials and fully becoming a member of the Green Lantern Corps. It is 78 pages, issue number 20. The entire issue is told as though it's history. The entire issue is told as though it's history. And the best part about this is that after we see the First Lantern get defeated, we get to jump ahead, because I'm sure none of this is going to happen now because, comics are in the, eternal second act, so we'll never actually get to see the endings of any of these characters' stories in this way, if they have an ending ever. But it's so interesting. The decisions that he makes are so, so good. For example, Kyle Rayner using the white light of life, since he's mastered all of the colors of the emotional spectrum, is traveling the galaxy as essentially a space prophet, healing ails, traveling the world. It's so amazing. John Stewart retires from the Corps and lives up to the legacy of his mother. He becomes a politician, I believe, and betters his community. Guy Gardner is the same old Guy Gardner. He owns and operates the Warriors Bar, regaling everybody with tales of his life as the Green Lantern. And Hal Jordan finally gets the ending he deserves, a life with Carol Ferris. Children with Carol Ferris. He finally gets to be a family man and just rest on his laurels. And it's so, so well done. But the best part about this story is that this tale is not being told by like Tomar Ray or Tomar 2, whichever one is alive. I can't remember which one died. I always get them mixed up in my head. It's not being told by Salak. It's not being told by a guardian of the universe. The man who watches over the Book of Oa is none other than Thal Sinestro. And the young recruit, who is a newly minted officer, asks him, wait, the story's not over. What about what happened to Sinestro after the events of this story? And this guy, who isn't revealing that he's Sinestro, simply says, no one knows, those pages have been burned from the book. He doesn't want anybody to focus on him. He's returned to the Green Lantern Corps. He's not the focus of the story. He was a villain more than he was a hero. It's not about him. It's so interesting. Also in this issue, when we're in the past, we get a moment between Hal Jordan and Sinestro. Hal asks, were we ever truly friends? And Sinestro replies, that's the tragedy of it all, Jordan. We will always be friends. Even though they fought countless times, even though they've been enemies for years, worst enemies, they will always be friends. And Sinestro was right. That is the exact tragedy of it. They were best friends. They will always have that history. But their paths took them different ways. If Sinestro had been able to be turned to the Green Lantern Corps earlier, or had not been expelled from the Green Lantern Corps, they could have been the two that brought order to the galaxy in a righteous way, not in a way that instills fear in others, but in a way that is good for all. That's great storytelling. That's great storytelling. But I think I'm going to leave it there. Let me know down below. Have I convinced you to read the Geoff Johns Green Lantern? Do you think I talk too long? Part of me, most of me, 99% of me thinks I talk too long. But the last 1% says, no, go on for another hour. You didn't go nearly in depth in some of the later story arcs. But let me know down below if you think that this storyline is worth reading. And let me know that if you have read it, if you agree with me that this is the greatest run of Green Lantern of all time. That's obviously not to say that there haven't been other great runs. There absolutely has, even in modern times. So far, I'm really enjoying the work that Jeremy Adams is doing. Before that, in, I want to say 2018, Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp did a great series. There's a lot there. But bar none, I don't think any of them can stand up to this, for the sheer fact that this story completely changed the entire mythos of Green Lantern. It expanded the universe in so many ways. It is amazing. But I think that we're going to leave it there. And now I think it's time that we take a look at the schedule so I can let you guys know what is coming up in the future. Let's see. Next Tuesday, the long-awaited Jurassic World Rebirth review will be dropping. Does the movie live up to our expectations? Does it succeed? Does it fail? Only time will tell, and that time will be from this moment 5 days. So you'll have to stick around to see what we think of that. And then I will be back Thursday. We're returning to a little bit of Superman for some of the final moments of the summer of Superman before the new movie is released. And I'll be talking about the first volume of Joshua Williamson's Superman run in the All-In Initiative, The Rise of the Superwoman. If you've been listening to my other reviews of Superman, you probably already know how I feel about that, how I feel about the whole run. But I think there are some great moments specifically in this story that I really enjoy. And I think with that, we're going to leave it. And I think, why not? Let's just recite the Green Lantern Oath. Everyone with me, please. And am I really going to do this right now? I am. I wonder if I can superimpose like the sounds of like an epic space opera in the background, if there's some royalty-free space opera music. If the music begins now, then you'll know that I found a piece that I really enjoy. And if not, then I couldn't find one that really fit the tone. But remember, everybody, in brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light.